Hi guys, welcome to another video. Today's topic will be photosynthesis, but today we'll be focusing on the first of two parts of photosynthesis, which is the light independent part of photosynthesis. So here I have written out the general reaction for photosynthesis. So as an input, we have six oxygen molecules. Next, we have six water molecules. And then we have light, and they go all together. And then an output would be C6H12O6 plus 6 O2 molecules. This one right here is the formula for glucose, which is what we get from photosynthesis that the plant uses. And then this extra 6O2 is just waste or will be used by the plant or other cells in other processes. This general reaction is just kind of like an overview, and I would recommend that you memorize it so that it's easier to kind of like organize because, for example, the six H2Os are spread out throughout the whole process of photosynthesis. And if you remember that there's six, then all you have to do is kind of sort them into whether it's in the first part, which is the light independent reactions, or in the Calvin cycle. So as I have stated here, the actual steps of this are multi-steps. So before getting into the exact process of the first part of photosynthesis, I would like to go over the leaf anatomy and the parts that go into photosynthesis. So as I have here, I have the stroma, which is this whole part right here. And the stroma is where carbon and oxygen can exchange. This exchange is really important because the plant can now use the stroma or the stromata in order to take in O2 or CO2 in order for photosynthesis to happen, and vice versa, O2 or CO2 can exit the stromata or the stroma. So moving on, the next really important part of the process before photosynthesis can even happen are the roots, which are right here. And right here, I have the plant, or more like the stem of the plant. And through the roots, O2 can travel up through the roots and all the way into the cell. And this will be really important because during the first part, and some parts during the Calvin cycle, but mainly in the first part, which is the light independent reaction, which we will talk about today, O2 will be spliced in half, and O2 will be used as waste. And like mentioned earlier, O2 will leave through the stroma or the stromata, which cannot happen if O2 is not taken up by the roots. Lastly, the integral part of the whole process of photosynthesis is the chloroplast. So the chloroplast, as mentioned before, is an organelle. And in my previous video, I mentioned that here's where photosynthesis happens. And in the diagram, as you can see, we have two types, which are the light reactions and the Calvin cycle, which again all happen inside the chloroplast. And here's just a very simple diagram of, what goes on. But today we're focusing on this part, and then on the next video, we'll be focusing on this one right here. So the first steps to start off photosynthesis in general starts with photosystem 2, which is what the PS stands for. And it starts with photons right here from the sun coming down and going into what we call chlorophyll. Let me spell it out here. And this chlorophyll is called P680. And P680 just basically means the type of pigment. Chlorophyll is a pigment that reflects green when light from the sun or photons travel into and it hits it. Because of this, H2O is also lysed. So we have two of them that then turn into 4 electrons that will go up into the electron acceptor right here. And we have 4 H ions that will also be used in the reaction. And we have just the waste from the O2 that was left behind. The electrons will then go again into the electron acceptor and go down into what we know as the transport electron train, which I will get into in just a second. It will travel down and through a series of proton pumps and other types of processes, we turn ADP and add that last phosphate, which will then turn into ATP. Once that's done, ATP will be a byproduct of the light-dependent reaction. Then more photons hit the photosystem 1 right here, and then the photons will then travel back up into the electron acceptor, and this time NADPH will then turn into NADPH, which will then go on to the Calvin cycle. NADPH will then continue photosynthesis along with ATP. So going back to what the electron chain is, which happens right here, and it travels down from the electron acceptor from the photons, and this happens between photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, and it basically transforms the chlorophyll, which is right here. It's right here in photosystem 1, and it turns it from P68 to chlorophyll P700, which is right here. That's why this is also green. And it happens in photosystem 1, and then that's what helps NADPH become NADPH. And speaking of NADPH, right here, NADPH stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, which is a long name, which is why we abbreviate NADP. This is an oxidizing agent, which basically means that it accepts electrons, which is why here it is able to accept it. And it's also reduced because of that acceptance of electrons, and it reduces down to NADPH. So for our very final outputs of the whole light-dependent reaction, we end up with 1 ATP that comes from the electron transport chain, 1 NADPH that comes at the very end of both photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, and 1/2 of an O2 molecule or oxygen molecule that comes from the H2O or the water molecule being cut in half. So that'll be it for today's video. Again, this is the first part of photosynthesis, so this is not the whole process. In next week's video, I'll be discussing the Calvin cycle, which is the second part of photosynthesis, and that's where we'll see the final products that will then be used by the cell. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!